The Majestic rider. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about getting the horse to give to the bit. I showed you lateral flexion and vertical flexion in the other video, but now I'm going to take you further along to know how to keep that horse's head down once you taught them to put it down. So if you look at my video of teaching your horse to give to the bit, you'll see I taught the horse in the video to give laterally, like I did with her. Good girl. She's chewing on a little cookie. And after I did that a bunch of times, then I used one rein and then the other to get the horse's head down. Good girl. And once they could do that, then I taught them that when I pick them on both reins, they're supposed to put their head down and just keep it down. So I did that over and over again. So what's the next step? We want to make sure the horse really understands this. So the next thing I did is walk them around, and then I stop and ask them to get their head down. Now she's way past this point, but I figured she'd be a good one to show on the video because she's so pretty. So what I do is just kind of walk around, and you can walk in a circle or you can walk straight. It doesn't really matter. And I just keep them going the same speed, but I'm not worried about their head. And then I teach them when I sit back, blow out, and then hold on the reins, they're supposed to stop and put their head down. So, hold. So I hold, and I wait for them to put their head down. So from now on, once I teach them that, anytime I walk and then I stop, you always want to ask the horse to put its head down. If you don't, you actually confuse the horse because they think, well, sometimes I'm supposed to put my head up and sometimes I'm supposed to put my head down. So I don't know which is the difference. So that's why the more consistent you are, and don't feel bad, you're just asking them like someone would ask me to sit up straight. It's not hurting me or anything, so it's not hurting her. You're just walking, stopping, asking them to put their head down. And all I'm doing, I'm putting very light pressure on her. She's very light. So I could squeeze with just 2 fingers and she would do this. Okay? Now, once I get that done, and they can do it really well, and that means they're not stopping and yanking on the bit, and they're not stopping and throwing their head up, and they're given every single time, then you know you can move on to the next step. But if you skip and go to the next step before that horse really understands or is ready, well, then just know the horse was guessing the whole time, and now it's really going to come out that they really didn't know what you were talking about, and so now they're not going to be able to keep their head down. So you'll see now as I walk her, she's pretty relaxed and keeps her head down most of the time. But now I'm going to show you how to keep her head kind of on the vertical or on the bit. So once I make this turn, now instead of stopping when I ask her to put her head down, I'm going to keep her walking. So the difference is instead of taking my leg off, breathing out, and then holding to get her head down, now I'm going to teach her that when I put pressure on, but I squeeze lightly with my calves, that you're supposed to put your head down but keep walking. So here we go. So I'm going to hold the light pressure, a little bit of leg. She put her head down, and I just open my fingers completely up. Okay? Let's walk around the camera to make it easier. So now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to hold lightly with my fingers. At the same time, I'm going to squeeze lightly with my calves. And when she puts her head down, I'm going to release. Now something just spooked her there, so I'm going to hold stop. And now I'm going to back up because I don't want her to squirt forward when she gets scared of something. We want to face our fears, Goldie. Good girl. Okay, so now I'm going to walk off again. So now every time I put pressure on the reins, like right now there's no pressure. It's just very light. My arms are forward. But when I pick up contact and I close my leg around her, I want her to put her head down and then give to the bit. So I'm going to do that over and over again until I get it that the horse will just carry its head down there. Remember, they learn from the release, not the pressure. But your timing has to be good. So if she puts her head down and I don't release at all, then the next thing they do is try something else, like throwing their head up. So your timing has to be pretty good. Okay? So once they learn that, which she has, but this is her first day back in work. She had a couple of days off. So a lot of times they're not as, responsive as they are towards the end of the week. Then I start asking them to keep their head down there all the time. Now she's a little bit on the pacey and step pacey side, so her creeping her head down is going to help her gaits. Each horse is different where I want them to carry their head. So some of them, I have them carry their head really low because their backs are so stiff and tense. And then there's others, I'm going to change my direction, that I don't want that low, because even though they might be pacey, those horses get way too heavy on their front end, and then if they trip, they're going to fall over. So the ones with the shorter strides, I can usually get their heads down, and if they're real pacey, I'll let it go lower. But the ones like the walking horses with the bigger strides, I'm careful on how low I get their head, because they can get pretty heavy on the front end. So now you'll see she's just carrying her head down. Now I want you to see what happens when I loosen the reins. So she's still keeping the same speed, and she's keeping her head down, but her back's not as rounded. And in time, she'll gait just fine like that. But for now, we have to help her. We want to frame her up and help her to stay in the correct frame for her gait. So as we walk around, what's going to happen is your horse in the beginning, if you haven't done it well, and most people skip steps, is they're going to keep picking their head up and down. And your release has to be right on time. So when I'm going to let go, so she picks her head up maybe a little bit. But if they pick their head up, here's just going down. I'm going to apply pressure, hold, and a light squeeze with my calf. If they're going faster, you're squeezing too much with your calf and not holding enough with your hand. If they're slowing down too much or stopping, then you don't have enough leg and too much hand. As you teach the horse, they should get very light, and they should not be getting worse or heavier. If they are, something's going wrong there, right? And you might need to take a lesson to figure out what you're doing wrong with your hands, okay? So now you'll see I just have a light contact, and I just keep guiding her. Okay. Now there's some horses that once you teach them to put their head down, they put it down way too far. What do? When they put their head down too far, yank on the bit, or pull you kind of towards the ground with their head, I just hold. And when they come back up, because in time they'll search for the answer, like, how do I get this pressure out of my mouth? Then when they come back up and they're right there, that's when I release. So wherever you want that horse's head, that's where you want to release. So if you have a real trotty horse and you're trying to teach it to bring its head up, because you need to do that to the gait, then you bring the horse's head up and then you release on the bit. Now, once you teach a horse to bring its head down, and once you teach the signal for it to bring its head up, which I just kind of pop its head up like that, then you can really adjust that horse. You can bring its head down if it's getting pacey or step pacey, and if it's getting trotty, you can raise its head up a little bit. Say she got a little too low, I'm going to shorten up a little bit. I just bring her head up a little bit and then let go. Bring her head up a little bit and then let go. Now I'm going to stop. She pulled a little bit, I'm going to hold. Now, if they pull a lot, this is what I do next. So I'm going to back her up by squeezing and relaxing. And now I'm going to walk forward again, and then I'm going to stop. And then bring her head down. So when they stop, if they ever yank on the bit, I just make them back up, do it again. I might have to do it twice, or I might have to do it 100 times for them to understand not to pull on the bit. But if you let go of the bit when they do that, then they learn to do that to get you to release on their mouth. Okay? So the trick of keeping them and keeping their head down as you're going is, again, do that lateral flexion, then get the vertical flexion, then get them to walk, stop, and put their head down, and then get them to just do this regular trail walk and keep their head down all the time. And then you want to make circles and patterns and be able to keep their head down in that pattern. So now I'm making the serpentine, so I'm bending her one way and then the other. If they keep putting their head up, the other trick is that you're probably dropping one of your reins. Now, I don't have much of a pull on her at all because she's a very sensitive mare. But I'm supporting her on both sides of her mouth. So if I let one rein go and kind of just do the other, they'll either just cut in, overbend, or they might pop their head up. So you want to use both reins. Okay? So you're supporting on both sides of her mouth. She's pulling right there, so I just held. Now I'm going to release. So when I release, in the beginning, I really push my arms forward or just kind of chuck my reins at them. As they get better, then I push my arms just a little bit. And then when they get much better, then I just release with my fingers, so you won't even see me releasing. But then what I'm doing is I just close my fingers to ask them to put their head down. I don't pull my hands down or do anything goofy. I just keep them right here and just squeeze lightly. And then when their head is down, I just open my fingers up. And my fingers are never completely straight, because if they are, then when they trip, your reins will go right out of your hands. And you don't want that to happen, because when they trip, you want to be able to close your fingers, lean back, and help them get back up. Okay? Because these gaited horses don't catch themselves a lot of times like regular horses do, because they can do so many things with their legs. So now I'm riding. Here, I'll show you. I'm just riding with my thumb and my index finger, okay? And her head is just staying down. So again, if you do it right, you'll be very light. Now, this is a very mild bit. People don't understand bits, and even when I explain the bits, they don't understand sometimes. But it has a roller in the middle. It doesn't squeeze her tongue. It puts a light pressure on her and kind of closes around her head. And you'll see she's just fine. If she didn't like the bit, she'd be throwing her head and doing all sorts of stuff, because she's a talkative mare, and she would just tell me. Okay? So once I get the serpentine and everything, then I start going around the arena. Now with her, I'll show you a little bit of her flat walk, and then we'll show you her running walk too. So now as I start to do my arena routine, what am I going to do? Because this is all about keeping her head on the bit. So I'm going to ask her to go a little faster. I'm alternating my legs, but you can use both legs at the same time, or one and then the other. I'm in the blue area. You'll see my hands are just a little bit in front of the horn. And I'm bending her, and I'm just keeping a very light pressure, hopefully you can see that, on her to keep her head down. Okay? So we want to be very light in time. We want to be able to steer with our bodies and not be in their mouth too much. But first we have to teach them what the bit means so we can actually communicate with them. Now you can do this with a bitless bridle, and you can do this with a hackamore. You can do it with a halter. You can do it with a bozo. You can do it with lots of things. You can do it with just a snaffle. All of that is fine. And I've explained kind of why you'll see a lot of my horses in shanks, because it helps the owners get their heads down, because people aren't as consistent or as good with their hands. And so it just helps them go in the right direction instead of the person yanking on a snaffle for the next 5 years. So as we're flat walking her, we just put a little pressure, and if she keeps her head down, then we just leave her alone. What we're trying to do is frame her up for the correct gait so she uses her body correctly, and she keeps her legs separated, and she's comfortable carrying us. Okay? So all I'm doing as I go around is, if her head comes up, I hold, and I add just a little bit more squeeze with my calves. So as I hold, she doesn't stop. Because again, if I just hold, which I'm going to do right now, if my leg's not on, she stops. Okay? Now, as they get better at this, you saw her pull up a little bit. She's still testing. So as they get better and better and you're consistent, that little pull up or the little pull down towards the ground will go away. But if they keep doing that, what it means is you're releasing at the wrong time. Okay? And that's the hard part. You will make lots of mistakes. The horse is going to tell you the mistake. If they keep pulling their head around, you're doing something wrong. You need more guidance or somebody to point it out. Okay? So we teach them what to do with the bits. We start them in the snaffles, and then we move on, and then I try to use what's going to help my client and control the horse the most for them. Okay? But with the other things like the bitless bridles and the bozels and the hackamores, depending on your talent, depends on how well you're going to keep their head in the correct position. But you're trying to give the horse to give to pressure. Okay? So again, you can do it with all those things. Some horses gait spectacular in that equipment. So it's whatever you want to use, as long as you're safe and that you're getting the answer to the horse so they understand. Now, with some of those, like the bitless bridle, and it depends which kind you're using and all of that, but sometimes you have to pull a little bit harder. And same thing with the snaffle. If you've got a 1,500-pound horse and he's pulling back on that snaffle and you're like 100 pounds, guess what? You might have to pull pretty hard in the beginning just to get the message across to that horse what they're supposed to do. But you have to put enough pressure on it so they understand. And then once they understand, you'll happily get along. There's no more head chucking problems. There's no more yanking on the bit. But as we go around, every time I feel her pull or her head starts to come up, I just close my fingers around the reins just a little tighter. And again, usually I'm holding the reins like there's a little chicken or frog or something that I'm trying not to squish. And then if their head starts coming up and they pull, I hold my fingers tighter around the reins. So I make like a fist. And I don't make a fist and then pull back. I just make a tight fist. So in the beginning, again, if you're not good with your hands, most people either pull too much or don't pull enough. And how do you know which one you're doing? Well, if no one's there to help you, you just got to try. So you try pulling harder, see what happens. That doesn't work, you try pulling lighter. Now there she just pulled on me. And all I did was when she pulled, I tightened my fingers up and I held. I didn't get into a pulling war. I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't slide the bit really hard across her tongue or anything, because I already taught her to give to pressure. So when she pulled, I said, no, don't do that. And I just held pressure, and she goes, oh, I get it, Gaye. I'm supposed to put my head down. Sorry, I had a relapse. Because again, if the horse has been doing that for a long time, they're going to keep trying here and there and see what's the real answer. Or they kind of, you're going around and they forget what they're doing, and they go, oh, is that it? And you're like, no, that's not it. Why'd you do that? And they're like, oh, sorry, I forgot. So it's just like you at work. Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you get it wrong. Now, all the sneezing she is doing is a release, and that's a good sign if your horse is doing that, okay? So it's letting go of stress and anxiety and getting their mind back to work. So of all the days, this would be the day that she would pull the most, because this is her first day back to work. So each day they should get better. If each day you're doing stuff, they're getting worse, then something's going wrong, okay? Now the hard part is as you're getting their head down, you got to remember to keep the same speed at the same time. So for your flat walk, again, it's not very fast, but it's faster than your trail walk. And you should feel back and forth motion. And the hard part is if your terrain goes up and down, which it does in this arena and in most people's arenas, because we don't have perfect arenas and nobody's dragging them for us, is that everywhere it goes down, they're going to get pacier. So if my horse gets pacey when it goes down, I'm going to half halt and slow down when I get to those areas. If it goes uphill, then I can keep my same speed. Now, she just chucked her head just for a second, and all I did was hold. That's all I did. Okay? So now we're going to stop. See her pull? Now she gave. So she's getting better at it, but I don't think that's what I want her to do. So I'm going to ask her again, like, let's try that again. And she pulled again, so we just back up again. So she's got to learn, if she doesn't stop without pulling on that bit, then I'm going to make her do it 20 times instead of once. Now there she put her head up, and then she went down. So that was better, because she didn't pull. So she said, how about that, Gaye? And I go, well, that was better, but you know what? I think you can do it a little bit better, Goldie. Okay, so not bad. So then I let him sit here, and now when she's on a loose rein, she can do anything with her head as long as she's not leaving. So she can go up, down, she can rub it, she can scratch it. I don't let him sniff the sand, because then a lot of times they'll roll. But if she wants to look around and all of that, I do. I never hold contact when I'm sitting here talking to somebody. If I think the horse is going to run away or I don't trust him well, I'll have my rein short, but I'll be like this. So there's still a big loop, but that way I can immediately pick up if I need to. Okay? So make sure also when you're teaching your horse to give to the bit, that when you give them breaks, it's a real break. You're not pulling on their mouth. You're not holding them in place. And if your horse can't stand in place, then you need to go back, teach them those one range stops over and over again, and get that done first before you move on. So I always make sure that everything I'm teaching the horses in steps so they understand, and that way if it starts to fall apart or they get confused, I can take a step back and go back a step and do that step over and then start again. Okay. So we're going to turn you off, and then we'll turn you back on when we get up to her running walk. If you're having issues and you're trying to figure out, did I do the other steps enough? Does my horse really understand to bring its head down? What should happen is when you pick up the reins, even if they're loose, see her bring her head in? So if I put any contact on her, she should just bring her head down. So I'm not pulling hard at all. But if you put any contact and they throw their head up and start spinning or backing up, see her put her head down, then they don't understand. But if they truly understand what it means, then every time you pick up, they'll put their head down like that. And that's when you know you've done a good previous job, and so the horse should understand the next step. Okay, so we flat walked around the arena, and what you're trying to, again, do this in stages. So first you got to be able to just trail walk with their head down, keeping it down the whole time. And again, how far you have it down, you might need help with, because you're trying to do what's going to help with your horse's gait. So besides just teaching them to give to the bit, we want to help their gait. So again, if they're very pacey but not heavy and lanky on the front end, I might bring their head way down. If they're pacey but heavy and lanky on their front end, then I might have their head here with their nose tucked in on the vertical and their neck arched more. If they're kind of trotty, well, then I'm going to have their head higher the whole time, and then I might tuck that nose in some, or I might not, depending what helps with the horse more. So with her, again, she could have her head like this, because she's not long and lanky, and she's not heavy on her front end. But if I have one of those horses, I'm going to, ride with a shorter rein. It's okay. She's always ready to do something. And you want a little arch in their neck, like that. Now, she's tucked under a little bit too much, but that's what you're thinking. And when you're up here and you're like, I can't tell, where's their head? You want to see an arch. So then this part will be higher than their ears, okay? And that's how you know you're doing it right. If it's like this, where it's a flat line and then the ears are pretty much the highest part, that's, again, fine with some horses, but the ones you need to collect a little bit more and help them more, and you don't want that head too low, then that doesn't work with them so well, right? You're like, how could you make it more confusing? I just did. But it's because of the gaited horse, okay? And so we're trying to get them to relax and gait well, but also carry the frame for the gait and then carry us with it, which is a lot for a horse to do. All right, so let's go to our running walk. So I took our break. You'll see as I'm picking up the rein, she's already putting her head down. Now I'm going to add the leg. I haven't even picked up contact yet. And what I'm going to do is, since she was on a little break, is slowly go back to our flat walk, and then we'll go to our running walk, okay? Now, when your horse has had a couple of days off, just always know that first ride back is kind of a reminder. It's not going to be a great ride. They're going to forget stuff. You're going to have to remind them. And that's just the way it is. It's like if you haven't been at work in a couple of days and you're like, oh, yeah, I got to do that. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So there's a lot of things to remember. Okay? So I always make sure they can trail walk first with their head down, that they can flat walk with their head down, and they keep it down all the time before I start going to the running walk. Because each time you add speed, it's harder. And so if you didn't get the steps before it well, then they're not going to keep their head down. So she doesn't have a very fast running walk in here. I'm sure she's much faster on the trail. But in here, this is pretty much what it is now. So when you're doing your running walk, if it's a horse you want to do a running walk, again, many breeds can do it, but they'll have a head shake and you'll have a back and forth motion. Now, if your next gait was the foxtrot, that's fine too. They'll still have a head shake and you'll have an up and down motion. Okay? And with the foxtrot, if your horse is pacey, you want their head pretty low. If the horse is trotty, you kind of want it neutral or up a little bit. Okay? So if you saw me riding that horse Trace and he's a foxtrotter, he gets his head way down too low, and that's going to make him more trotty. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to round that horse out and bring his head down lower, because then he'll hit a hard trot, and we want a nice foxtrot. Okay? So this is her running walk. And again, this is the hardest part about gaiting, is that each horse has a different speed, and each horse has a different speed in the arena. Okay? But you'll see she keeps her head down pretty good. Now, she has little bits where she's bringing it up and down, but all I do is when she brings her head up, I just close my fingers and I close my calves around her like a light, very light pressure. But that takes time in figuring out what that horse needs. Now, if I gait her and she's like this, you'll see she's gaiting okay. She's not doing anything bad. She actually got quieter, didn't you? But I don't want to ride like that on the trail, because there's lots of obstacles, things that jump out, and it's a fine gait, but it's not as nice as when she's a little bit more in self-collection. Okay? Now there she got her head out because I let her go. So with her, for her running walk, I want her framed up a little bit. So you're just, again, it's your choice how you want your horse and where you think they gait best. But whatever you do, just be safe that you can control your horse if you do have those reins real long. And it's different if you have a big open field and that's where you're riding, not much is going to go wrong. But if you're in the woods where things jump out or there's people and bikes and you're on a loose floppy rein and that horse is not that great, they're going to think you're not up there and they're going to keep bolting and doing bad stuff. Okay. So we're going to go around a couple more times and then we're going to go the other way and I'll show you the other direction too. But this is her bad direction. To the left was her bad way. So I worked a lot to the left. I did this side more and I did it longer and I did more circles and I did more leg yields to try to get her left side as strong as her right side is. Okay? But you'll see, I don't have much contact on this bit. Except right there when she tried to stop at the gate. She's like, let's stop. So people get confused what they want to ride and bit-wise. There she's a little too fast, so I just kind of held and breathed out and slowed her down. And that's what you'll have to do is you go around. If you teach them these previous steps, like the one rein stop and walking and stopping and backing up and all those things besides where to put their head, then when they get fast, I don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff with my hands. I just kind of sit back, use my seat, I breathe out, and the horse slows down. So I'm not really touching the bit a lot unless I really need to. And that's where people get confused, is they think we're pulling on the bit all the time, and they see these shanks we have in their mouth, and they get very confused of what we're doing with it. Now I'm going to stop and back up. So we try to be very light. Now that back up wasn't so good, was it? So let's try it again. So I like to stop and back up a lot because I want to make sure when I ask that horse to stop, they think backwards in case something really bad is going to happen. So let's do the turn on the haunches with her. And as I do the turn on the haunches in the beginning, I don't care where their head is because it's more about the turn. But once they get better, then every time I push them over a step, if they bring that head up, I just hold and wait for them to bring their head back down. So in time, they'll understand that as I'm doing the turn and I hold pressure, that they're supposed to keep their head down. But again, you have to teach it, and you can't teach it all at once. So you start with just teaching the turn and not worry about if their head is up or down. And then after you've taught them how to put their head down, and then you start doing the turn and they got the turn down pretty good, then you can start adding in to hold pressure so they understand to keep their head down. But again, I hold pressure, and every time they keep that head down, then I release. Okay, so this is her running walk in this direction. And if you're like, I don't know the speed of my running walk, what you do is you go fast enough that your horse stops shaking its head or it gets bouncy like that, and you go, well, that was it. So you want a head shake and you want a fast walk. And each horse has its different ability on how it can do that. So some are much faster than others, and some are not so fast in their running walk. Okay? Some horses are very slow, so their flat walk might be like 2 miles per hour, and their running walk is 4 miles per hour. Then you might have one that their flat walk is 5 miles per hour, and their running walk is 10 miles per hour. It just depends on the horse, okay? Because lots of people, they pick on other people, and they go, that's not a running walk. That's not fast enough. So see, my reins were short enough that I caught her. She just spooked there, and that's good for you to see, okay? Now, when she spooked, she jumped sideways, and that's more than she usually does. But again, she had a couple days off, so that's okay. But I stop them. I don't keep going because I want them to know, hey, if you spook, we're going to stay right by that spooky object, so I wouldn't spook if I was you. So, now you made me lose my train of thought. But each horse is different. So even though your horse might be fast and have a fast running walk, it doesn't mean your friend's horse has a fast running walk. Each horse's speed is different, okay? But this is hers. Now she's a little antsy now that she just spooked, so when they get antsy and they're on the pacey side, they usually get a little step pacey. So you have to realize, well, she's a little nervous now. Maybe I'll give her something to do. Like maybe I'll do a little shoulder in right here. And now look, she's patient. She's like, well, that made her a little bit worse. Now my reins kind of got long, so it's a little hard to do, so I'm going to shorten up. But I'm going to give her little jobs to do, because it's only going to make her a better horse. And the pacey ones, I like to teach the shoulder in, because then when they get pacey, I can just usually push their shoulders over and they'll come back out of the pace. Okay? So I know I started this video talking about how to keep their head down, and now I'm talking about everything. That's just me. All right, but you'll see she's keeping her head down pretty well, but I have contact on both reins. I'm just holding lightly. You can see, I don't know if you can see that far. That's just my thumb and my index finger. I mean my thumb and my index finger, so I can hold it pretty well just with that. So I don't need much contact on her to help her keep her head down. But some horses are going to be duller, and you might have to put more pressure. And some horses are going to be more sensitive, and those you don't have to put much pressure at all. They just want you to leave them alone. So they're like, oh, you got one finger? I understand. Put my head down. Just leave me alone. So she's doing it well. So I just have a light pressure with my calves against her, so she knows to keep going, because I like to keep pressure on the horses when I make them go, and then I take my leg off when I want them to stop, so that way if people are falling off or you have friends on them or something, and I give lessons on my horses that they understand. So let's try to stop right here. Now she pulled, didn't she? Now again, she didn't get that habit on her own. Somebody let her, when she stopped, she pulled and they let go. So I have to correct that by doing it over and over again. So that's why I keep stopping with her, because if I find something wrong, I want to fix it. I want to make it better for her. Okay? So now we'll do it again. She's like, oh, Gaye. So that was better. It took her longer to put her head down, but she didn't pull. All right, let's go back up to speed. So as you go around, if you have one that pulls or doesn't like to back up or something, you add that into your arena routine. You do it all the time till they have it down really well and they don't pull anymore and they back up nicely. Okay? So I'm just light pressure, keeping the horse in between my legs, so I'm keeping her straight, because if they're weaving around, then a lot of times that's why they won't keep their head down, because you're not holding pressure all around their body. So the only way she can escape the pressure I'm putting on her, because I'm holding her lightly with my legs and with my hands, and I'm keeping her straight, is to put her head down. But if I wasn't keeping her straight, well, then she could bulge to the left or she could bulge to the right, and sometimes that's the whole reason that they're not keeping their head down at all. All right, so hopefully that helps you understand now how to keep their head down when you're gaiting.